And one of the things that I saw amongst some of my peers that I looked up to that I thought were really successful individuals, they all had one thing in common, and that was diversity in their business life. Many of them were involved in multiple businesses, multiple facets.
So what would be your strategy look like in different phases, like when you hit 1 million, 5 million, and even 20 million plus?
It takes a lot of investment back into the company to go from 1 million to 5 million to 10 million. And one of the biggest things that I see with roofing companies that fail is, they're going out buying new trucks and bass boats and going to Vegas with their returns. And it's hard for them to have sustainability.
We talk about investing a lot, but how would you invest money if you haven't saved any? What are the things that you feel in your journey that you did differently than others that led you to this point?
You can't really make investments until you at least have a stable, safe environment for yourself. And sometimes it takes a little bit of grind. I mean, I've been doing this 25 years and, it's only been in the last 10 years or so that I've been able to make some of these other moves and some of these other investments.
How important do you feel is your gut feeling when you are making decisions like this?
Oh man, 1,000%. I mean, your gut feeling is your body's intuition telling you whether or not this is a good fit for you. I always say trust your gut.
When you are shining, I feel that when you start growing, you start shining, and that is when you catch the attention of these big government institutes like the IRS, FBI, or you catch these lawsuits and everything as well. What should be those preventive measures as a business owner that you should take to just have a safety net or develop a safety net against all the big problems that you face when you are succeeding?
Yeah, number one, I mean, you control what you can control, right? And you try not to lose sleep over the things that are out of your control. But like you said, when you get to a certain level, there are certain people out there that just want to try to bring you down or tear you down. And, you got to take confidence in who you are and in the value that you have. But from a pure legal standpoint with that, I mean, if you're doing things the right way and you're hiring the right people around you, you've got the right CPA, they're going to take care of the IRS for you and making sure that you're doing things that are compliant where you don't have to worry about that. If
Besides real estate, which top 3 markets do you feel can bring the best ROI in next 10 years? Hey everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the Roofing Millionaires podcast, the only roofing podcast where we don't promote anyone and we don't sell you anything. In this episode, we are sitting down with Justin O'Neill from Fair Claims Roofing in Texas, and we have dedicated this conversation on how you can save more money from your roofing business by following the right ways and how you can make the right investments that bring you real ROI. This episode will teach you what should be the real meaning of value and ROI to business owners like you and how you can achieve success that helps you change lives. Do like and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want us to bring more roofing experts like this on the show who can help you find the right success opportunities. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Roofing Millionaires podcast. Justin, it's great to have you on the show today. How are you feeling and what has 2025 brought to you so far?
I'm feeling great. I mean, 2025 has brought some challenges, but it's also brought some excitement, especially recently. We just recently had some storms in our market, which usually don't happen, especially this late in the season, but especially kind of right in the backyard of where we're branded and where our office is at. So that's really exciting. Our team is ready to get after it. We've already been working this last week and have had a lot of success, which we expect to. We've been here for a long time. Been in business 23 years, and we've had a pretty good run. Most of our business is within a 15-mile radius of our office anyway. So it's be the first time in a while we've had just a good storm right here in our local market.
Normally, when I start the podcast, I ask people how they ended up in roofing, but looking at you, you have quite a diverse lifestyle, I would say. So I just want to ask you, can you explain to the audience that who is Justin O'Neill and where he began from, where he is now, and how do you see your future looking like?
Well, I mean, gosh, I got into the business a little bit by chance. I grew up in a rural area in East Texas, near Tyler, Texas, about an hour and a half outside of Dallas, Texas, and grew up fairly humble, My family was in the garbage business. And my role in the family was to take over the garbage business someday. I worked in the garbage business, did a lot of odd jobs, and always very independent, very self-sufficient. I turned 18 on a Wednesday, moved out on a Saturday. That's just kind of how I grew up. But I was getting a little burnout. I was actually helping a family friend as well. And I got into roofing really as a part-time job and started doing it just kind of in the evenings and a few days a week that I wasn't committed to my family's business, and did really well right out of the gate. And, started questioning, why I was going to college, because I could see a career opportunity in roofing. This was 25 years ago, and decided to put college on hold, and with the intention of going back if it didn't work out. And started my own company about a year and a half, 2 years later, when I was 21, with a partner. And man, we've been going strong ever since. I built a pretty successful business, and been very blessed because of it.
So I want this conversation to be like, I know that you got into roofing from being an estimation guy, and then you are in there for 25 years, but you have quite other businesses too. So I want to frame this conversation around people who have made money, but now they are looking to invest, and they have to manage money, and the profits, and how to manage money, because that is something that I don't feel so many people talk about in the podcasts nowadays. And even if they do, it is around like a kind of advice, or someone is out there just throwing random words. But you are someone, when I see your profile, you have another business as well, DNA, as far as I know, and you have this roofing company, and you are doing other things too. So you have achieved something in life by putting your things in order, and by managing the money and managing everything, managing profits. So let's just start with, when you are working at McDonald's and you have a family that is already in business, and you don't have any formal education of business particularly, and you transition into being a company owner. So what is the lag that you faced right away from transitioning from estimation or an employee to a business owner?
Well, number one, everybody needs an education. It just doesn't always have to come in a formal setting. Right. I mean, I had a little bit of formal education. I did have about a year and a half of college, but we're all a makeup of who we invest our time with, and everybody needs mentorship, and everybody has somebody in their life that's at least shown them the way. And for me, my grandfather was that person early in life. He was an entrepreneur, like I said, in the garbage business, and he only had a ninth grade education, but he was a very intelligent guy, and he understood business. And again, from the time I was 12 years old, I was working and hustling. I mean, I was the kid that would bring candy and gum in my backpack to school in junior high, and sell it, buy it by the pack and sell it by the piece. So I had a little bit of a business head on my shoulders ever since I can remember. But even still, as I got into roofing, I invested time anytime I had an opportunity to go to seminars or to have education. I would attend those things, to be able to educate myself. And I always recommend people spend time with people that they want to be like, and people that you look up to, or you see people that are successful that are doing certain things. You start trying to pay attention and hang around. A lot of times those people will share and even give you just different thoughts of what they're doing, or you just an observation. You observe successful people and what they do. And one of the things that I saw amongst some of my peers that I looked up to, that I thought were really successful individuals, they all had one thing in common, and that was diversity in their business life. Many of them were involved in multiple businesses, multiple facets. A lot of them involved in various real estate endeavors, that they did well in as well. But roofing was kind of their anchor. Roofing is that stable business that, if you've built it well, can provide a good source of income and a good source of base, per se. And people also want to do too much too fast. You do have to take time and build a base. You have to build some assets. One of the biggest blessings for me is just how young I got started. I got into this business when I was 19 years old. I bought my first home, really when I was 18, but even bought my first home in the Houston area when I was 21. And when you're able to get started young, you have all that time working for you to build equities in your properties that you can then leverage to buy other properties. And the same thing with your business, when you're able to be consistent. You always hear that term consistency. That is really the key. You don't have to go out and hit a home run in your first year or two. You just have to be good at what you do, and you have to be consistent with it. And you do that year after year after year, and you start accumulating money, you start accumulating savings. But you also have to have some risk tolerance, and that's one of the good things about being younger. When I was younger, I'm not so young anymore, but you have that risk tolerance the younger that you are, and you have to take some chances. And, sometimes those things work out, sometimes they don't. But for me, as I began accumulating some assets, a wise guy once told me everybody knows about Dave Ramsey and kind of that Dave Ramsey mentality. Somebody said, that model works for some people, but it's not necessarily the best for others, especially somebody like you. I had a property that I owned fully, it was paid for. And it wasn't an expensive property, but it was paid for, and it brought in rent revenue. But a really successful real estate guy challenged me, and he's like, that property, yeah, you're getting a return on it every year, but if you don't really need the income, your business is doing well. You could sell that property, use that as a 20% down payment on 5 times the value of that property, and lease those out, right? And you lease those out, you can break even as long as you're financially stable enough to be able to cover when it's vacant for a little bit or whatever, which, I'd gotten to the point where I had, and it kind of opened my mind up that, debt really can be an asset in that type of environment, right? So, you take something that's paid for and yeah, it's there, but that's only going to grow so much by itself. But you take debt as an asset to go in and multiply that times 5, and then, allow those properties to pay for themselves. And then in 15 years, you 5 times your money plus your appreciation on it, right? So you start accumulating more of those assets. And then, you mentioned my DNA. That's a company that I'm a part owner in as an investor. I had that opportunity come up for me just in this last year, but it was too good to pass up for me. I'm really excited about our drink brand. We're the only company out there manufacturing a collagen infused water, a flavored water, and it tastes amazing. When you try the product, and it has all natural, healthy ingredients, no artificial flavors, no artificial stuff. There's so much things that are not good for you, that are not healthy for you, and most of the beverages, especially in the energy drink. We make a performance drink as well that's also all natural, naturally caffeinated, and it tastes great. That's the big key. We've all had some products that are supposed to be on the healthier side, but usually they taste like garbage. And the first time I had the DNA product, I was like, man, this is amazing. This is really good. And I was a consumer, and I was friends with some of the owners, and anyway, they had an opportunity to be able to buy in. They were raising some capital to prepare for some big things that we were expecting this year. So I got an opportunity to join in and be a part of that. And obviously the whole brand of that, DNA, stands for Do Nothing Average, which resonates strongly with me. I've always tried to be exceptional or try to excel at anything I do. I don't believe in doing anything halfway. Just a brand, Do Nothing Average, just hit home with me, because that is kind of, the epitome of my lifestyle, right? Just in trying to excel at everything that I do. And I think that resonates with a lot of people too, regardless of whether you're the very best at what you do. It's not about that. It's just about being above average. Don't settle for mediocrity. Go out there and give it your best, do your very best. And I believe in this world, man, if you're putting that kind of effort in, you're always going to be better than average, because there's enough people out there that are comfortable with mediocrity that you're going to blow those guys by. Anyway, that's how I got involved in the DNA. But I believe in diversity. I believe in taking opportunities, taking risks. Obviously there's some risk when you invest your finances into different companies, but the greater the risk, the greater reward. There's a lot of upside to our business, and a lot of opportunity. It's still kind of in the early stages of it, but it's I've got high expectations for that to do really well and ultimately end up with a pretty big return on my investment. And have fun along
I
the
think
way,
you have given
being a
me
part of it.
a lot of stuff to talk about, and I'm glad that you touched this point, because I had to bring it
Yeah.
later on in the interview. That most people, they say that you have to have multiple streams of income. Like when you have a business and it takes off 1 or 2 years, you are into that business, and then you just start exploring other options instead of putting that money back into the business and considering the profit that you make as an investment and doing that investment in your own business. You just start opening a total different, or you enter into a total different industry, and you think that now you have money, you don't need the hustle or the effort that it takes to actually build a business from scratch. But what I believe, I can be totally wrong here, that whenever you start a new business, no matter where you are, you have to put the exact same efforts and energy to actually make it work. And just as you said, that to actually make it above average and make it the best. I don't want you, like as I said before, that many people give advice, but that advice oftentimes they don't even apply to themselves. So I want to know that back in time last year, when you had this opportunity on your table and you are already in roofing and this energy drink, that is a total different industry. So how did you realize or analyze that now it is the time that I should diversify? Or you mentioned that you have to take risks. So how did you analyze that now it is time to take this calculated risk?
You look at obviously all things, and I had accumulated some capital that I had planned for even some other investments. I mean, full transparency, I was looking at doing some other real estate investing with that, and had kind of made that move. So I had the resources already kind of sitting on the sidelines, and just not to change subjects, but I had some crypto investments that obviously popped off really well. At the end of last year, so those were up, so it was a little bit more comfortable, that you talk about risk tolerance, just being able to be comfortable with parting ways with certain liquid resources to have another asset that, could take a little bit of time. When I looked at everything, the safe play was real estate. It's hard to go terribly wrong in real estate, but it's also, you're not going to hit a home run in real estate. No, I mean, you can, but for me, with the type of investing that I'm doing, those are long-term plays. Those are things that you could double your money, over so many years. But it takes a long time for those properties to appreciate, to be worth double their value. But again, with DNA, the return on that, could be 20, 30x. So it's one of those things that, hey, this could be a home run ball for me with an investment. I felt like my risk tolerance was there, that, you always have to consider when you make an investment like that. Unlike real estate is, pretty safe. You're never going to go bust usually on a real estate deal, as far as, you put your capital in, that property is usually going to be worth what that capital is in most cases, especially in the residential world where I was doing the real estate investing. But when you invest into a company, that company could fail. And you could lose everything. You could lose your entire investment. So that's the higher risk. But the return on that, you could have a company go off, and when it flips, or when it sells someday, based on the expected performance that you think you're going to be able to achieve with that company, you're looking at getting a 20, 30x return on your money, which is considerably greater than what you would get on real estate. For me, it felt like it was the right time. I felt like my financial situation was comfortable enough to warrant that risk and be comfortably confident that I was going to be fine, whether it worked or whether it didn't. But obviously, I wasn't just trying to burn my money. I had high confidence that it was going to work out. But it was at the perfect point in my life where I felt like, hey, this is the opportunity to really be able to make an exponential return on my money. And if it doesn't work out, my roofing business is stable, been around a long time. I'm going to be okay. It's not going to ruin me financially if it doesn't work out, because it was a pretty substantial investment. But it's also one of those things that if it does happen the way that I'm expecting it to happen, my small ownership in the drink company could be worth as much as my roofing company's worth. That's taken many, many years to build. Anyway, that's why I made that decision. But also, I had a lot of faith and trust in the people involved in the company. All those things are critical. You've got to look at the business plan, look at the return, look at everything there. And, there's no such thing as a sure thing, but this was what I felt like was a safe investment in a company that's definitely going to take off.
Do you believe that there is a mindset shift as well? Like, let's just say you are starting now, and when you will hit 1 million from your roofing company, you will have a different kind of approach towards investments. And when you will hit 5 million or 10 million, you will have a different strategy. And then you will hit 20 million, you will have a different strategy. So let's just say you are starting now, and you have the knowledge that you have gathered from last 20 years. So what would be your strategy look like in different phases, like when you hit 1 million, 5 million, and even 20 million plus?
You know, a lot of that depends on the individual and what their needs are, what their goals are. You know, it takes a lot of investment back into the company to go from 1 million to 5 million to 10 million. And one of the biggest things that I see with roofing companies that fail is you have companies that'll start, they'll have some momentum, they'll do well, and rather than keeping that money in the company to be able to have some cushion for a rainy day, or being able to invest into that company to either buy into different softwares or buy into different advertising or doing different things that's going to help get you to that next level. Well, they're going out buying new trucks and bass boats and going to Vegas with their returns. And it's hard for them to have sustainability because most roofing entrepreneurs they're smaller guys. Usually they're one-man shows, or they have a few guys, but all the profits that the company's making, they're taking home, and that's what they're living off of. And, you have to be able to get it to the point where you're accumulating profit and accumulating capital in your business, and then reinvesting that into the business until you get to a place where, you're comfortable being able to do different things. And you have to do that. It takes time. It takes patience. But, I remember, back when I started, like I said, I came from humble roots. I mean, my goal when I was 19, 20 years old was to live in a house someday that had bricks on it. And, being able to achieve those things. And every time you hit a goal or you accomplish something that you thought was, a far reach, well, you realize, hey, that wasn't so bad, and you set a new goal. And it's the same thing financially. I remember a time in my life where it was a big deal to have 10,000 savings account. It's like, because that represented security to me. And, but when you get to that point and you start realizing, okay, I've got a cushion, I've got some security here. Okay, now when you accumulate more, that's what I can have to be able to make other investments or to do other things. And obviously that number's grown exponentially too. I mean, even in my life today, there's a certain amount of liquid capital I expect to have in my business accounts and my personal accounts. To have that level of security and comfort, for the rainy day. You just never know. You don't plan to have a rainy day, but you have to plan in case there is one. And once you have that in place, then you can start doing other things and either making investments back into your roofing business or even diversifying. I don't think there's anything wrong with diversifying once you're at a level that you feel comfortable or satisfied with. And I don't know that there's ever anybody that's totally satisfied, because everybody's always in somewhat of a growth mind or wanting to do better. But it is okay to be able to be at a sustainable place when you've done consistent revenue. Maybe that's 5 million. Maybe you're doing well on a $5 million basis. Well, have a set amount of the profits that you're making on that and stick that back till it accumulates to a certain amount, and then either take that and make an investment into your company, or take that and diversify, go buy a property, especially if you're leasing. That was one of the best things that I did in my roofing business was, back in 2016, almost 10 years ago, we decided to stop leasing an office and we bought property, for our company. It took a little bit of capital to be able to buy into that, but it wasn't substantial. And, that property is worth 5 times today what it was, when I bought it. But, you're paying rent. You're paying rent for either office space or something, where you're storing equipment. But once you own it, then you've got full control over it. You can start doing different things, but you're still owning an asset that you can either borrow against to do something else, or if you ever needed to, you could liquidate it and still have something. Whereas when you're purely leasing something, it's just an expense, and it's, you've used it and it's gone. But when you actually purchase something, well, then you're holding something that's worth something. I'm a big believer in buying things of value, even if they're depreciable assets. They're still liquidable assets that you could liquidate and get the capital out of if you needed. So there's really not nearly as much risk or fear into using your liquid capital to buy liquidable assets because, worst case scenario, you could always liquidate those, or even better, use those as collateral to be able to increase your line of credit, et cetera, at the bank. And that's another big, part of all of this too, is having great relationships with your bank, building history there, but accumulating assets that you can use as leverage to be able to have collateralized lines or whatever you need to be able to have the capital that you need to keep things going. I mean, even in our business, we have lines of credit at the bank to be able to deal with AR. We all are managing that cash flow juggle, especially if you're doing insurance work or new construction work. Those are the two big things that can be a challenge on cash flow. Just pure retail re-roofing is not too bad because you should be closing that stuff out as soon as you finish. But on the new construction side of things, especially in the commercial world, as well as the insurance, there's a lot of times you're not collecting the final check from people until they receive it from their insurance companies, especially if there's supplements involved, and those they take time, and but before you know it, you can. It's not uncommon for us to have well over $1 million in AR, and it's easy to look at the pictures or the books and know that, hey, if all this was in, this is where we would be, but it's not always in. So you're always kind of doing the juggling act of, what you got, who you owe, and who owes you. And but that's where the bank comes in. Is if there's ever a gap there, the bank, has lines of credit that allow you to have capital to be able to kind of float that. But the more assets that you're able to accumulate, you don't necessarily have to use your money to do those things. You can actually use that as collateral sitting there that the banks will give you a line of credit to be able to do those things with. The same thing even in the real estate world. I mean, a lot of people are sitting on properties that have more than doubled in value in the last 5 years, and you don't want to necessarily refinance them because you may have locked in at a 2 or 3% interest rate. You sure don't want to refinance out at a 7% interest rate, but you could maybe get a home equity line of credit against your equity, and that might have a little higher interest rate, but then you have a whole line of credit that you could pull from that would be a separate loan. It'd be a second mortgage, but you'd still have that capital that you could take and make an investment into something else. If you really felt like that was going to grow, or you could take that, invest that into your company to be able to hire somebody or to buy whatever thing that you needed in your company to help you get to the next level. Even equipment purchases, man. I mean, I bought, metal fabrication equipment several years ago. You start looking at, okay, hey, what does this cost to have somebody else make for me? And other headaches going along with it. How many jobs do we need to do a year to make up for that? Well, man, we're already doing that. We're this is something that we'll pay for in 18 months. So why are we paying to have somebody else do something that we can do ourselves when I can take, some capital and invest into it, or, just get a loan from the bank, with some of the other things that you have to be able to leverage that. You pay that off really fast. Now you're making more profit because you're owning the equipment now that you used to pay somebody else to make for you. I mean, it's just things like that you have to think about in your business, but you have to have the risk tolerance to do it, and you have to have the vision and the confidence that you're going to continue doing what you're doing, and that comes from consistency in the business. That comes from doing this for many years and being able to look back over a 5-year period, a 10-year period, and see some consistency and some history there. It's really hard in my opinion, for somebody that's just starting out trying to make big moves, because until you've had some years of doing this to be able to see the consistency pattern, it is really hard to know what you can depend on and what you can count on. And that's where you have to have patience to be able to grind and build some stability into what you're doing, and diversity into what you're doing too. There's a lot of, guys that only do storms and chase storms, and that can obviously be up and down depending on what the storm seasons are like. And, so I'm a big advocate of diversifying. Obviously, we all love storm work, and it's great when it happens, but you've got to have a model that sustains you when there's not a storm. And, we focused over the years on doing that. We've got good relationships with custom home builders. We do some custom home work, and we also, every year, it seems like we're doing more and more retail re-roofing in addition to the storms. There's some years, we're doing 70% retail because there's not many storms in our area. I kind of made a commitment that I didn't want to chase storms a long time ago. I want to sleep in my bed every night. I want to create a business that allows me to do that. You may not be able to have the crazy years that some of the storm companies have that are just machines that go into these markets and work, but it provided a lifestyle for me that was enjoyable, where I could be involved and present in my family's life, my kids' life, and just have more stability And ultimately we built something that was more sustainable too, because the business that you build is more residual, with the relationships and with your branding in the community, where you're not needing a storm to be able to be profitable. You can be very profitable with or without one, but when one happens, and kind of like we've recently had, then you're really able to capitalize off of it and have a big year.
Let me just absorb all of that. And yes,
Yes, a lot of
and
a lot of
I
information at one
agree with
time.
every single word that you said, that when you are growing, so many things attract you. And I think that we should come back to how to leverage line of credit and how you should diversify your portfolio in your company, like what percentage of your work should be storms and insurance and retail. Before that, I think that we talk about investing a lot, but how would you invest money if you haven't saved any? You have to something in your savings as well before you start investing. And when I speak with people like you, because you have achieved many things in life, I believe that you have done something that not many people do, and you have done something different than others. So speaking of that, what do you feel is the thing that you done different from others? Like you just said that you like purchasing things of value. So if I am someone, I am making money, and someone just comes and tells me that there is cryptocurrency out there, and if you invest in Ethereum now, it's gonna boom and it's gonna hit 100K next year, but that doesn't happen. I invest in that and it just crashes. So I have to know what are the things that align with me, and what are the things that don't align with me. So speaking of that, what do you feel that you did differently? Because as far as I can guess, you have had, like, when you are growing, you have many people coming to you, like, invest into this, invest into that, and you have to say no to many opportunities. And at the same time, you have to learn financing and make your company profitable as well. So what are the things that you feel in your journey that you did differently than others that led you to this point?
The big thing, like I said, was setting a financial goal early to be able to get to where you're comfortable, because you can't really make investments until you at least have a stable, safe environment for yourself. And sometimes that takes a little bit of grind. I mean, again, I've been doing this 25 years, and it's only been in the last 10 years or so that I've been able to make some of these other moves and some of these other investments. So it took 10 to 15 years of earning in my roofing business and saving and getting to a point where I was financially comfortable. Things are in place to where these other investments are not going to break me, because you have to have a mindset somewhat of, hey, this could go bust, this could not work out, and if it doesn't work out, are you okay? And that's one of the things that I did. I mean, I didn't make too many risky moves early. I got myself to a place of just grinding and saving and accumulating, and fortunately, I've also bought property early, and early in my life. So those equities, the appreciations that you get and moving into different homes, I've built a lot of security just in real estate equity. But that, in addition to the money that you save in your roofing business, but you have to make a plan. You have to, and that's the first plan, is to get yourself financially secure, whatever that is to each person. But maybe that's having 10K reserve, maybe that's 100K reserve, maybe it's $500,000 reserve. But you have to have at all times before you start making other investments, and that may mean you just have to grind it out harder or longer to get to that point. But once you get to that point where you're comfortable or where you're stable, and especially a guy that's starting out, those numbers are not going to be that big. I mean, but I just, for me, even as a startup guy, I would say, man, you need at least 6 figures plus. I would say between 100 and 250,000 in reserve capital. That's not necessarily in your operating expenses, and then that's not invested, just so that's there. Either that or a line of credit similar to that, to where if something happens, you've got that security. You're not worrying about, hey, how am I going to make payroll, or how am I going to make my mortgage payment? You've got to do that first. But once you've got that done, and as you accumulate other assets, and if you're running a successful business, those are going to continue to come. That's when you've got the capital of, okay, let's make some moves. I've accumulated this much. Let's invest this either into a property where I'm at. Let's invest this into equipment. Let's invest this into, maybe it's a little more risk, a risky kind of thing where you're going to buy into something like crypto, or you're going to buy into this company that somebody's told you about. But you have to also understand that, some things are a higher risk than others. And what is your risk tolerance? And if you've got a high risk tolerance and you really believe in it, go for it. But the thing for me is I felt like I positioned myself to where when I made the go for it moves, even failure in that was not going to be a total failure for me. I tried to put myself in a position where any of the other moves that I was making, well, if those didn't work out, I still had my safety net of comfortability to fall back on. And I built my main income source in my roofing business to a stable point where that was consistent, and it had been consistent for years to where I could depend on that consistency. So to me, that's first step, for personal security, getting your business to a consistent point, getting it to where even if you're just a one-man show, getting it to where, hey, I know I can depend on having this much production every year because I've done it this many years. So there's always can be a little bit of a change or a downturn, but for the most part, when you've been doing this 5, 10, 15 years, you should be able to look back over all your years and see a consistent pattern of, hey, where's the median? Where can I depend on with this? And especially, as you grow with people, you have to hire people and you have to bring people in too to be able to grow. Otherwise, you're going to hit a ceiling pretty quick with what you're able to do yourself. But regardless of all of that, find that consistent point, and from there you can plan on it. You can't necessarily spend based on where you want to be. You have to spend based on where you're at now. And you also have to save based on where you're at now to be able to make it, what you want to spend possible and to be more affordable for you. But it takes a plan. You have to look at where you're at and you have to be able to grow, but you have to succeed at level 1 before you can go to level 2. And you have to succeed at level 2 before you can go to level 3. And I think a lot of guys on level 1 and they want to hit level 5 in the first year. It's not very practical. You might get lucky and have that work out. There's a lot of guys out there that have done that, but for a sustainable, something that I feel like is attainable by anybody, you have to take it one step at a time. And you have to build it, get to one level, build it, get to another level, and get to different security and comfort levels where you can make bigger risks, knowing that if those risks don't work out, that you're still going to be okay. The guys that go all in on one thing, those may pop off, but they may not. And if they don't, man, the guys that went all in on it, they're the ones that end up in kind of a bad spot. And, you just have to be wise and you have to make good decisions and also based on what your personal risk tolerance is. My risk tolerance is different than somebody else's. Some people don't, they're very risk averse. They don't want big risks and that's okay too. There's stable things there, but, you have to, number one, invest into what's your core, right? I mean, we're roofing companies. That's your core. You've got to get that core to the place that you want to do it. And for me, you mentioned other opportunities. I have had plenty of opportunities. Hey, let's do this, let's do that. And my mindset for the longest time, and it still is to some extent, if that's going to take my time and energy, is that time and energy better off invested into a side hustle? Or is that better invested into my main hustle? What's going to produce more return for me? And more times than not, that's always been like, hey, that's a great idea. But if I put that same time and effort and energy into my own business, whether that's going out and hustling a little bit more, or whether that's trying to recruit and grow, or whatever that is, whatever that time is, if I invested that into my own business, we all know that there's profit there and there's return there. So that was always kind of my litmus test. And again, you look at the stuff that I'm involved in, it's very little time. The DNA, I'm an investor. Yes, I'm going to push it. I'm going to support it and I'm going to help where I can. But it's a functioning company all on its own. We've got key people in place that are making that needle move that I can sit back on the sidelines and watch and come in for meetings and hear what's going on without having to be the guy moving the needle. For me, those are the kind of investments that I need and want to be involved in, because if I'm going to put my efforts and my own time into things, rarely is there going to be something that I can put my time in that's going to be more profitable for me than my roofing business, because that's ultimately what we know. It's what we're good at. It's been tried and true, and it's a good, very profitable business. So, for me, it's always better for me to put additional time. If I'm going to work an extra 10, 20 hours a week. Hey, let's put that into the roofing business rather than trying to have a side hustle. I'm doing 10 or 20 hours a week to be diversified.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you don't want those other sources of incomes, but for me, the things that I can invest in that, can produce mailbox money. That's a word I like to use. Investments that produce mailbox money is what's best for me because my personal time is truly best spent investing back into my roofing business and getting it to a place. And you also want to get to a place ultimately where you can start to not have to have your time there. I mean, goal for me is getting my business to where it's as successful as it is now without me being as heavily involved as it is. I'm still very active and I would have a successful company now, even if I wasn't there. But, I am very involved and do a lot. And part of my goal is getting it to the place where if I wasn't there at all, I'd still be able to draw, the same type of return on it. And that's the big thing. It's like when I'm there, my income is substantially higher because I'm still involved in producing. I still sell, quite a bit. Actually, I enjoy that part of it, as well as oversee the business. If I wasn't doing that part of it, it substantially reduces the amount of income that comes from it. But anyway, you just kind of work towards goals and, continue to do what do what's dependable, do what's stable, but diverse as you're able to,
And you
really.
know what is the best thing about this interview? I don't know. Like, I love your energy, and whenever I am writing something down here on this paper, you have made this totally useless because whenever a question pops up in my mind, you just answer it automatically. Like, a question pops up in here, and you next moment you are answering that. I don't know why that is happening.
Yeah.
So let me just ask you this.
ADD actually working at its finest, man.
Maybe.
That's
Okay,
just popping
so
around, man.
let me just ask you this. I know many
Yeah.
people might find this silly, but you are into health. How important do you feel is your gut feeling when you are making decisions like this? Because at times you don't have the knowledge that other persons have, or you have to make some investment decisions based on your gut feeling as well, or your instincts. So do you feel that they play a role in all of this as well?
Oh man, 1,000%. I mean, your gut feeling is your body's intuition telling you whether or not this is a good fit for you. I always say trust your gut. If it doesn't feel right for whatever reason, you got to trust that. But on the other side, if you really have a good gut feeling about it, go for it. I think sometimes our brain gets in the way, because we try to overthink things. You want to analyze it, but at the same time, you got to listen to your heart and listen to your gut. I feel like that will rarely ever fail you. More times than not, I mean, you hear stories, man, I wish I would have listened to my gut. If I'd have just listened to my gut, listened to my instinct, things would have been different. So you have to do that. You have to listen to your gut and listen to what you feel is the right move at the right time. I just think you'd rather do that than to regret having not done that.
And do you also believe that a lot of this comes down to what your grandfather taught you? Because I feel that I can watch 100 videos on investments and strategy on YouTube. And back in time, that is my personal opinion, the kings and the emperors, they didn't send their kids to universities or colleges. They had a mentor dedicated to their children. That is what I know. That gives a special kind of treatment and knowledge to you because you are getting all the attention from one mentor and he is shaping your life. So there are two things. One is the skills, the technical skills and the attributes that you have, like you can learn the operations, sales and finances. But another thing is the attitude that you have, the behavior that you have, your mindset, how humble you are, and how do you define your rights and wrongs. So this is another thing. So do you feel that your grandfather also played a role in all of this?
100%. Just when it boils down to work ethic, learning work ethic, and just ethics in general, and doing the right thing. Being taught those values, at a young age, and not only being taught that, but seeing it demonstrated, made a big impact into my life. And as a business owner now, I say this all the time: you can learn an industry, you can learn trades, you can learn about a company, you can learn about how to do things. But the one thing that you can't teach is work ethic. You can't teach attitude. Somebody with a good work ethic and the right attitude, man, if they've got just a little bit of snap, they're going to do great. They're going to do so well. But somebody that could be highly educated, if they don't have the right work ethic and they don't have a negative attitude about things, man, that's really hard to change in people, the just natural characteristics that people have. And I think some of that's genetic, some of that's personality, but I think a lot of that, to your point, is kind of taught by whoever your mentor or your parents or whatever your surroundings and your upbringing was. But that was a big deal for me, the work ethic especially. Ever since I was old enough to physically do something, I was expected to work and to earn whatever it was. I mean, I remember being an elementary age kid, and I'd ask my grandfather for $5 or for $10 because I wanted something from the store. And I remember him, saying there's a 5-gallon bucket, over by the tree, and there's, hundreds of pine cones out underneath the pine tree. Go pick all those pine cones up and I'll give you what you're looking for. So I mean, even as a young kid, I learned the value of work and money and having an ethic to follow through and get the job done and to do a good job, taking pride in a job. Things that aren't necessarily as common, I don't think, today as it was when I was growing up. But I think even growing up with my grandfather being that guy for me, it was a little bit different mentality generation. I feel like I was given that generational mentality that a lot of boomers were raised with, because of my grandfather's influence in me. But that work ethic, and then also just the morals and the values of treating people right, and those lessons and making sure that you do the right thing, understanding what integrity is, and always, doing the right thing, even when nobody's looking. I mean, just those things were instilled in me and just part of what makes me who I am and part of my character. But because of that, I feel like I've been very blessed because of that. And it's crazy in roofing, especially where I'm at in Texas, where it's unregulated, no licensing, and it may be true, in other places too, but it's an industry where doing what should be expected, in my opinion, from any company, showing up, doing what you say you're going to do, standing behind your work, those are things that should be expected. But I feel like in our industry, it makes you exceptional. I feel like that's one of the reasons we've been as successful as we have been, is because we've done the basics. We've worked hard, but we do what we say we're going to do. We show up. If we make a mistake, we correct it. We own up to whatever needs to be owned up to, and we make it right. To me, that should be expected from any company, in any business, in any industry. But it's not anymore. It's not. And fortunately, unfortunately, that makes you exceptional in our industry. Just doing what I feel like should be the basics.
I would sum that up by saying that you just have to have disciplined people, disciplined thought, and disciplined action to succeed in any field. And I have something stuck in my mind, value, the word value that you used, that you analyze value. I think that value is not money most of the times as well. Like, I don't know from where it just popped up in my mind. Last week, I was listening to a podcast by someone, and he mentioned that my biggest dream was getting a Rolls Royce. So when I purchased it, I started from rock bottom, and when I had my hands on its steering, I felt happy for a moment or two. And now, after a few moments, I'm thinking, now what? Like, what should I do next? Now I just want to go back to, and I want to show my parents that I achieved this, but I cannot do that now. So this Rolls Royce and this steering is no value for me, just because I perceived that it is valuable, but now the value has shifted, or I don't know, I am articulating it in a perfect way, but I think you can get my message that the value changes over time as well. Sometimes, like when you are a kid, for me, maybe $10 million carry a lot of worth and value, but for you, value is spending time with your kids. So how do you handle that part?
It's all a balance. I mean, I grew up pretty humble, and there are things that like I mentioned earlier, a goal is to have a house with bricks on it. And, but you get there and you want to, I think by human nature, we want to be able to have more, or to have nice things, and I've been able to accumulate some nice things that, I'm happy that I have, and they bring a lot of enjoyment to me, but they don't fill that place in your heart that you need for just pure joy, right? Joy, I think comes from simpler things like love and relationship. I mean, I think if you sum up most of happiness, it comes from relationship in some aspect, whether that's with your family, your children, your friends. And if you achieve great things, but you lose relationship in the process, you really didn't gain anything. Not that achieving those things or hitting those goals are meaningless. I think they're important, and I think we all want them. I still want them. There's still goals and things that some of them are material goals that I would like to have, but at the pure core of it, if those goals aren't achieved in relationship with other people, I have a saying, and I still believe it to my core: nothing is worth having if it's not worth sharing. And if you don't have anybody to share it with, what are you getting? It's like, to me, anything that you're trying to achieve or to have, it's not worth having if it's not worth sharing. And you have to have people in your life, relationships in your life that make, that you want to share it with. And it's a balance. You asked about kids. One of the things I loved about the roofing business, especially when my kids were younger, is it did provide the flexibility, especially in the environment where we built it, where we were just the local company, and we'd work storms that hit our area, but we didn't really travel. As it allowed me, like if I needed, if my kid had a program at school at 10:30 in the morning, I could just block my schedule and go to it. Well, the roofing industry has been very great in that flexibility. I was able to coach my son many years. Flag football, you get to spend that time and make that a priority. But, the hustler in me too, I would go do those things. There's many nights that I would, I always tried to have dinner with my family, but there were many nights that I would go back to the office and work until 2 or 3 in the morning, because that's what had to be done to be able to accomplish the work and achieve the work. And, it's just, you've got to have the right mentality. To me, you've got to figure out a way to do both, because you can't alienate your family. You've got to be there. And then ultimately those relationships are what makes everything else matter. But you also have to put in the work, and you have to find that balance to where you're being true to your family and the people around you. You're making time for them, but you can't not put in the work over it too. And sometimes it means long days. It means long hours. Maybe you have to split your schedule a little bit, work, go home for a little bit, spend some time, sit back down at the desk and grind out and do what you need to do. It's just, you got to do both, or figure out a way to do both, or also be able to accept what the trade-off is. It's okay to forego, this deal or that deal, because the time is more important. And, one of the things too that I've learned over the years is that, some things can't wait, but a lot of things will. I think sometimes we put priority into certain projects, certain follow-ups or whatever, that we won't take a week to go spend a vacation with our family. When the reality is most all of that stuff will still be here in a week when you get back. And there's never a good time to take a trip. There's never a good time to take time off, but you have to do that every now and then. Number one, to reset yourself, but also to, spend time with those relationships that matter. I mean, maybe you're not married, maybe you don't have kids, but at the end of the day, everything that we're doing in life is meant to be relational. If you don't have anybody to share things with, or your successes and your journey, everything feels pretty empty. Nothing's going to be real satisfying, in my opinion, material wise, if they're not relationships in your life to be able to enjoy it with you.
I think that it all comes down to defining your levels as well. Like you just spoken earlier, that you have to define your levels. I think that when you are deciding or defining your levels, you have to make columns of material gains and the relationships. And as you said, that some things can wait and something can't. So you have to not just make your levels based on the monetary gains, but you have to make room for these things as well.
Yeah, and even within your family life, there are some things that are critical. There are some things that you want. And there's some things that, well, it's okay. I can justify not being there because this thing with the business is more important at this time. But you have to be able to analyze that and be able to prioritize your life, because if not, you'll be hyper focused on things that may not provide the return overall that you're looking for in your life. And there are always consequences on one side or the other of putting too much eggs into one basket instead of kind of spreading them out. But it's different for everybody. I can't tell anybody exactly what they need to do or how they need to do it. But I know that's something in my life that I still have to look at today, really more than ever. With the different things I'm involved in. But I do know at the core, none of the things that I've got going on business wise are more important than your loved ones and your family. But, as a provider and as somebody that wants to make sure that your loved ones and family are supported and taken care of and are able to live a lifestyle that, was something that you always wanted to provide for those loved ones, you also have to put in the work. You have to put in the time. It's just a juggling act and a balancing act. And sometimes those baskets need more attention. You just have to be flexible enough in your schedule to give attention to the things that are in the biggest need. At the end of the day, the relationships do matter more and are the most important. There's no about a monetary gain or money that's going to replace great relationships with the people that you care
100%.
about.
And you also mentioned that if you don't do this, like if you don't make room for these things and the relationships, you feel empty even if you have achieved success. So how did you learn that? Like, was there any phase where you felt empty and you felt that, okay, I need to make some shifts or I need to change some things, or was it something that was infused in you forever?
It's always been a core principle, and some of that is related to my faith too, just in, my beliefs there. But yeah, but at a core, it's just always been part of who I am. I've always been a very social and relational, person. But yeah, I mean, just from some of the material things, there's been some times where, like, man, it'd be really cool to get this, and you get it, and it's great, like you said, but it's not that everlasting feeling that you think, okay, if I could just get there, I could just get that, and hey, I would have made it, because that's a lie. I mean, don't get me wrong; those things are great, and it's great to have them, but they're not going to fulfill you in the same way that relationships are going to fulfill you. But I think we all learn from that. I think some people just they have to experience it more to get it. Others, I've always kind of known that, and that's always been part of my key truths and part of my core values. But yeah, but I think as you experience things and you go through things in life, those experiences kind of help refine that even further, because you've experienced it, you can give people advice, or people can give you advice, and you can take it, but until you really live it or you have an experience yourself, sometimes it doesn't quite resonate as strongly as it does when you've actually felt it yourself.
I think this is a problem of society as well. Like men nowadays, we have this constant fear that if we don't do these things, or if I don't get this deal, or if I don't achieve this, I will lose my spouse, or I will lose my girlfriend, or they will leave me. And this is what happens as well. But I think that if you have the right relationships with you, and if you have that feeling that no matter what happens, or even if things go south, I have these people around me and we will figure it out. So if we as men have this feeling or have this faith, I think this can sort out many things too.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that is it's a balance. Like we've always been saying. I do feel like society puts a lot of value in us as men based on what we have and what we achieve and what we bring to the table, and to some extent, that is our I take the weight of being the provider for my family. There is some realness to having to go out and achieve things to be able to bring things home. You still have to provide, and you still have to have that value. You can't be lazy and but you still can't put so much priority into it. And I think you have to be able to get to a place of contentment. It's okay to be content with where you're at. I've talked to other people about this too. Just because you're not satisfied and you're always wanting to accomplish bigger and better things doesn't mean that you can't have some element of contentment with where you're already at. Having contentment with your success can be a positive thing because it does allow you to realize, hey, it's okay to diversify, spend some more time doing this, appreciate what you've accomplished, but it doesn't mean that you're satisfied with that being it. I think it's okay to always want to achieve more and to set bigger goals, just to challenge yourself, but still have an element of contentment with, hey, if I don't achieve the next thing, it's not the end all say all. It's, I'm content with where I'm at on a daily basis. I'm grateful for my blessings, because, you wake up and you look around and you realize, man, there's people that are way, way far worse than where you're at. And you've already gotten to an amazing place. So you have to have some appreciation and thankfulness for the blessings that you've been bestowed on already. I think you can appreciate those things and appreciate those blessings in your life and still continue to work hard to achieve other blessings, but it doesn't mean that you're not grateful for the blessings that you've had. And I think it just puts a spirit of peace and contentment in your life, regardless of whether the next big thing pops off for you or not. I think you can be joyful and have joy in your life, regardless of what kind of success that you're having in business with that type of mindset. To me, that doesn't mean that you don't put forth the work and put forth the effort to be the very best that you can possibly be and to try to achieve everything that you can achieve. But I think that sense of joy and contentment that comes from that allows you to live in the moment too, allows you to be able to be grateful for the blessings that you've had and the opportunities that you've had and the things that you've accomplished. While still working to have more, but appreciate it along the way and be able to also still put value in the things that really do matter most, which is, like we said before, family relationships and, the things that really,
Amazing.
mean
And
something to you.
speaking of mindset and becoming better every single day, you also mentioned that you don't have to be lazy. I think there is an issue in the society as another issue as well, which is misinformation. So many people are misinformed. I will like to share an event with you that just happened with me last month. I hired someone, and after 3 or 4 weeks, I'm telling him that your performance is not up to the mark. When he went back home, he shared a quote with me on WhatsApp. It was from Bill Gates or maybe Steve Jobs, and it mentioned that I only hire lazy people because they can find a better solution to everything. And I totally disagree with that statement because I think that is a misinformation. Considering the hyper-competitive world we live in today, I don't think so you can afford to be lazy or not be better.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. I mean, it's with things ever adapting and changing, especially with technology and different things. If you're even just sitting still and not trying to grow and hustle, there's going to be somebody else out there that's going to be doing those things that are going to pass you by. And there's a difference between contentment and complacency, right? I think you can be content and happy with where things are, but you can't be complacent, because if you're just complacent and you're not going to put forth the effort and you're not trying to grow, the other side of the coin could happen. You could actually start regressing and things could go downhill. So yeah, there's no room for laziness. And I think that's even from a character trait. I think from a joy standpoint and a value, even at your core work ethic, there's a lot of pride that you feel when you've worked as hard as you can, when you've put forth the effort, when you've done everything that you can do. I think that, also just allows you to take pride and enjoy what you're doing, because you are putting in the work to be able to get it done. If the guy being lazy that just, is not putting forth the right effort and taking pride into doing something great, not being, okay with mediocrity. And, kind of back to my DNA, don't be content with being average. Don't put in a mediocre effort. Put your best effort into it. No matter what you're going to do, if you're going to do something, do it right. I think, there's just so much more pride and joy that comes out of your efforts at work, whether you're an executive or whether you're a salesperson or whether you're just an admin assistant or even somebody that's just, interning for the summer, man. I mean, if you're gonna take on a job, you're gonna take on a responsibility, give it your best effort and do the very best that you can at it, because that's going to make that accomplishment that you have in that role so much more gratifying. You're going to get so much more joy and pride out of a job well done for that effort that you put in, rather than just kind of going in and coasting and putting that mediocre effort. I just think it gives you more self-worth. I think a lot of people struggle with that, but they also they haven't experienced that. They don't get it. But, I guess not everybody is built the same way. But for me, that's the only way to be. If you're going to do something, do it well and give it your best, and be able to look back at what you did and take pride in the effort that you made.
Thank you for sharing that. And I have a few more questions for you. The first one is that let's come back to the investment part. When you are shining, I feel that when you start growing, you start shining, and that is when you catch the attention of these big government institutes like the IRS, FBI, or you catch these lawsuits and everything as well. So as a business owner, these things come naturally with success. That is what I believe. And you have to take preventive measures against that, so they don't end up eating all your money or you don't lose everything. And I think you are a perfect person to whom I can ask this, that what should be those preventive measures as a business owner that you should take to just have a safety net or develop a safety net against all the big problems that you face when you are succeeding?
Yeah, number one, I mean, you control what you can control, right? And you try not to lose sleep over the things that are out of your control. But like you said, when you get to a certain level, there are certain people out there that just want to try to bring you down or tear you down. And, you got to take confidence in who you are and in the value that you have. But from a pure legal standpoint with that, I mean, if you're doing things the right way and you're hiring the right people around you, you've got the right CPA, they're going to take care of the IRS for you and making sure that you're doing things that are compliant where you don't have to worry about that. If you're doing things the right way and you've got the right team in your corner to be able to go to bat for you should something come up that needs to be looked at, that's what you have those people for. Mm-hmm. Same thing in the legal standpoint. You've got to have good attorneys and good counsel that can kind of help deal with things. But for me, man, I've always tried to avoid any type of legal action really at all cost. I've seen what that can do and how expensive that can be to even defend your good name, even in frivolous type measures. And, number one, sometimes it's okay to take a small financial loss rather than trying to throw good money and good energy at a bad situation. I've seen a lot of guys that get involved into legal actions with customers because they were right. I mean, they were in the right. The customer was in the wrong. Spending six figures with an attorney trying to defend your good name and when you're right is not always the best investment when you could have just made something go away or paid to fix something that wasn't really your problem to fix for much less money. You have to look at it from a big picture standpoint. And you just take care of business, but you don't let it get to that point. If you got somebody that you think, is going to try to sue you for something, sometimes even if it's unmerited, the financial expense to make it go away is often less expensive than the financial expense of defending that. So you just have to kind of weigh that out, but moral and principle victories don't pay. They might make you feel good, but at the end of the day, you won't feel good if you're having to spend tons of money to get a moral victory. I see a lot of guys that make emotional decisions. They're emotionally charged because they feel like they've been, they're in a situation that's unjust and to heck with that guy. I'll show him. I mean, there's nothing good that comes out of that, but a lot of money that's lost. And especially, if you're in the, early stages or middle stages of your career, you don't really have money to be burning just to go try to have a moral victory. Do what you can. There's going to be unreasonable people out there that you just can't make happy. But if you've done everything that you can possibly do to try to do the right thing, to take the high road, to try to, make sure that, you're keeping people happy within reason, you're going to avoid most of that. And obviously that's going to fare well for you and not getting drugged down by that, because in addition to the expense of legal type things, the stress, the emotional toll, the time, just having to discuss those things and deal with those things, the sooner you make those things go away, the better off you are, because then you're able to focus your time, effort, and energy on things that make you money instead of having to be worrying about defense and defending your money, and they're just not good. So the more you can prevent that stuff, the better. I think
it is more about, like you just said, doing the right things the right way and figuring out that is this a battle that I have to fight or not. So this clears a lot of things for you. And speaking of the right way, is there anything else you would like to add to this as well? Like, what is the right way of saving yourself? Like you just said that if you do things the right way, these things don't pop up. So what is something that you feel should be added to this as well?
Well, I mean, when I say the right way, I just mean the legally right way. And then within a business, the right way is doing what I feel like is the moral thing to do, and doing it correct, right? If you're doing the work, and I'm big on documenting what it is that's being agreed to. I think that saves you a lot too. If you're entering into a contract on something, try to have your contracts as detail specific as possible, because if there's ever a disagreement with you and a client, you always have that to go back and reference. And if it's in writing, then that's what you're supposed to do. If it's not in writing, then that's what's going to help you say, well, that wasn't part of the job because this was what was part of the job. But if it's in there, do it. And if there's a question, I mean, and even if there's a misunderstanding too, even with an example, say they were under the impression that, hey, this was supposed to be in it and you didn't do it, and you're starting to get a feeling that this could go legal or something like that, man, just do it. I mean, what's it going to cost to do what they're asking you to do? I mean, as long as it's reasonable, it's far less expensive than what your time is going to be lost and the money that you're going to spend trying to defend what wasn't in the contract. That's what I mean too about the moral wins. You might have a moral win, but it might cost you, tens of thousands of dollars to have it when you could have fixed it for, a couple grand. Just take care of things and be smart, make good financial decisions on that. But again, if you're trying to keep those things, if you try to do things in a way that makes you feel good, but again, just doing what you say you're going to do things the right way. And if you did something, if you make a mistake, I went up to it and just fix it. There's things that we're legally responsible for, and there's things that we do because it's just the right thing to do. And what's right for me may not be different may be different than somebody else. I think you just have to listen to your gut, listen to your heart of what you feel like needs to be done to handle a situation. It's also okay to make a stand, but, protect your long-term interest with legal repercussions and that kind of thing too, because it's not worth getting into a lawsuit over, any situation if you can avoid it. Just do what you need to do to keep those things at bay. And I think if you're truly trying to go out of your way for your clients and truly trying to make sure that they're satisfied, even if they're being unreasonable in a request, that's usually going to fare much better for you than trying to always have your heels in the sand and trying to be combative or, unagreeable, or always trying to put yourself and your profits first rather than trying to put your customer satisfaction first. Because happy customers is the key to, our industry success in the service business, the word of mouth. I mean, it's not worth having an unhappy customer more times than not over what amounts to a relatively small amount of money. It can just cost you so much more in the long run trying to, defend what you should have or shouldn't have done on something when you could have just corrected it, taken care of it, made everybody happy.
I think it is about exactly like you just said, that it's about morals and customer care too. Like if you have morals set and if you care about the customers, you will eventually choose the path that is most beneficial for the customer. I have two more questions for you only. So because I think that if we talk about systems here and scaling and growth and team, it would make this conversation a 3 to 4 hour conversation, and I'm sure you don't have time for it and the listeners don't have time for that as well. Maybe we should sit down again later this year to discuss all of that. But earlier in this interview, you mentioned that you have to diversify in your own company too. Like you have to decide that I just don't have to do storm chasing only. I have to diversify the jobs that I do. I have to do insurance, retails, and storm chasing. So let's just say you are starting out right now and you have to make this decision as well. Many people say that you just have to focus on one thing when you are starting out and you just have to multiply on that. But I believe that you should diversify and you should see that what gives you the best return. So what would be the percentage of jobs that you would be focusing upon in terms of storm chasing, insurance, and retail?
For me, it's hard to do a finite percentage on that, right? I mean, for me, we started out doing mostly insurance claims, and that's what we did. Obviously that's kind of a by need basis, right? You don't control Mother Nature. Kind of the decision that I made is I did not want to be a storm chaser per se. I didn't want to have to travel or go. I wanted to be able to put roots and be able to be in the community. And, within my market, if there was storm work out there, we would even work old storms. I think that's what a lot of companies do. But I knew in the beginning that if, it's kind of the whole metaphor of hunting and farming. To me, storm work is a lot of hunting because you're always going out and hunting for the storm. I knew that I didn't want to be just a hunter because a hunter has to hunt every day or, you starve. But I also know that you can't afford to be just a farmer in the beginning because it takes so long for those seeds to grow that you'd starve waiting on the harvest. So for me, early on when we were doing storms, I was always trying to make moves or to do branding or to do things that would pay dividends down the road to start more of a local approach where we would get calls and get retail. I don't think you ever fully move away from storm. but the storms could move away from you. You try to make investments into it to where you have more opportunity. I've not had a concerted thought of, hey, I need to do this much retail, this much storms. It's just kind of organically happened and organically shifted to retail because I knew that if I didn't have certain efforts into a retail branded business, that you would always do just storms and you could live or die by that. So we started making those efforts into retail, and then even along the way made a concerted effort to try to partner with key custom home builders. I knew I wasn't really interested in trying to do a bunch of production type homework. That's a whole different business model that takes a whole lot more infrastructure for that type of work that, would be difficult to do. That's why most production home roofing guys focus mainly on that. But being able to pick up some key custom home guys that build the kind of homes that have the roofs on them that we would like to be a part of. Obviously that's a little lower margin business, but it's more of a residual business. Just kind of helps fill in the gaps. That kind of gives you a little bit more of a base. It kind of helps offset some of your overhead. But on the storm and retail base, it's like my effort really is going out there and working the market as we have it. If the market has had storms, well, we're working storms. If the market hasn't had storms, we're still in a market that has old roofs. And, if we're trying to do retail, well, then that's the message, right? We're not trying to sell storms in an environment where there hasn't been any storms, or there's not really justification, or there's not damage. You have to have, at the core of it, you have to have damage to be able to work storms. If there's damage there that's storm related, then sure, we're going to help them with that claim and we're going to try to do the claim. But there's still a good market out there of roofs that really get old and have to be replaced, whether it has storm damage or not. And I think you just have to have your eyes open when you're out there for opportunities. It's kind of like growing your net, rather than saying, hey, I only have one net and I've got to fit in these 3 different compartments. Grow your net, have your storm business, but grow your net where you're able to capture business that's outside of storm business so that you end up becoming diversified because you're being cast farther and you're able to bring in those kind of jobs, and diversify your efforts because there may or may not be a storm, or the insurance situation could change. We've already seen it changing. It's with deductibles increasing, coverages going down, ACV policies. We've been shifting into a retail business even on the storm side of things. So it's actually been paying pretty good dividends for us that we've built together a sales process that's geared for the retail customer. And we still kind of lead with the similar process even when we're working insurance claims because, people need to buy roofs, in my opinion. They need to buy roofs from qualified roofing contractors. They don't need to be sold on an insurance advocate necessarily on every situation that's out there. I mean, can that be part of what you do for people? Sure. But I think at the core, our job is to be a good roofing contractor that's giving them good value in the roofing systems that we're building, not trying to sell on the fact that, hey, we're going to be the guy that helps you deal with your insurance company. That can be secondary. I think that's not completely unimportant, but I think what's most important, if you're the roofing guy, the roofs that you're putting on and the roofs that you're selling and the components that you're doing should be first. And that should be the thing that you're leading with, whether you're doing insurance work or retail work. And I think if you're leading that way, regardless of what the opportunities are you're given, you're setting yourself up for success. And you should want to set yourself up to have those opportunities. Do networking with realtors, people that, are running into problems with roofs when they're selling the homes that can feed you leads like that. And invest into brand advertising. That's a key part of the retail business. That's also a long play that you have to do. Brand advertising doesn't automatically work just in a few months after you do it. It takes years of consistency in brand advertising. But if you have the patience and consistency for it, if you're brand advertising while you're out door knocking, eventually the phone starts ringing more and more and more, and you end up like we are, where we really don't knock doors anymore. I mean, we have a set amount of organic leads that come into our office week in, week out. It picks up and slows down by rain rather than, other circumstances, but more rain, more calls because people are having roof problems. But again, that's more of a sustainable and consistent business model rather than thinking, hey, we have to go out and knock doors in this neighborhood because we found storm damage in it that we don't know when it happened. At least that's there. You can always go after that, but investing into people's normal need responses when those needs come up, I think is going to allow you to have a bigger net and be able to capture more of those opportunities. Root yourself into a market so that the next time a storm actually hits in your market, you're the guy everybody's calling rather than having to bring guys in to
I
knock
agree
doors to
with you
get
on
business.
that. Will you just give give a minute or two on this sales process? And like, I feel that door knocking should be dead. That is what my approach is. But you just said that you have a specialized process for retail jobs and you have
Yeah.
cracked branding and marketing, and now you are the go-to brand for locals. So how did you crack all of that? Like, if someone is confused and they want to know this.
Well, you learn through trial and error. You learn what works, and you start trying to repeat it and develop and work on it. I believe, and you read sales training books and those sort of things, and you realize that, hey, people are visual learners. You have to be able to, explain and educate people, but you also have to be able to, determine your own price. Number one, there's a lot of guys out there that are so focused on insurance, they don't even have a way of estimating their own stuff without using a program like Xactimate or Sendility. I mean, you should be able to calculate what your costs are and determine what kind of margin that you want or that you need, and be able to monetize that with or without the mentality of insurance pricing. Repairs are a part of that too. You have to be able to estimate, hey, what is a good cost per unit for repairs, and be able to start doing repair work, because repair work will also start, putting you into that retail space. But for us in the sales process, I mean, we go out, we sit down, and our whole goal is to inform and educate clients, to what their needs are. We educate them about the industry. We educate them about us, what we feel like we're the best and safest choice to do their project. And then we go through what their options are for replacement. And we go through and we explain what the value of each one is. We use a keynote presentation, for them to be able to have a visual opportunity to learn what we're talking about. I mean, most roofers will sit and they'll talk about all these different roofing terms as the customer glassy-eyed smiles and shakes their head. They don't have a clue what you're talking about. They maybe heard the word, but we do roofs every day. We know what roofing terms or brand specific upgrades are, but the client doesn't, even though they may act like they do. So being able to give them a visual exercise and seeing that really helps a lot. And and you have to work to your strengths. When you have the tenure and the certifications and all the things that we feel like differentiate us, you have to communicate it. It doesn't do you any good to put a logo onto your business card if you're not explaining what that logo is and what it means and why that makes you better. It's just all communication. But we've got a pretty good sales process of a retail type presentation where we go in and we inform, educate, give everybody their options, and then we have a pretty itemized price structure that's able to allow people to see what things cost and have the option to pick what has the most value to them, because not all customers are the same. Your investor client's probably going to err on the side of doing more the bare minimum and more economic choice, whereas most of our clients are seeking the best value, and often that is doing things of better grades and better accessories, but they've made an informed decision because they understand the value in those items rather than just you putting it on a proposal and it's listed there and they really don't understand what the value of those things are. But that's, in a summary, that's kind of what our sales process is driven. Mm-hmm. And it's effective both in insurance and retail, because even somebody making a choice of who's going to repair their roof from a weather event, those things all still matter. I think the majority of the industry doesn't even get into that. I think hey, we work for insurance proceeds and this is the brand and color, and we've got all these badges, so that's why you should do business with us. Or, hey, we're going to get this thing bought when the other guy wouldn't, and that's the only thing they've got why they're the best contractor. And those guys are going to lose to me 10 out of 10 times. You also mentioned
about books. So what are the books that you feel actually added value to help you learn all this?
Yeah, I mean, early on, just the old basics. The 7 Habits book was a big thing for me with my time management. The old Stephen Covey book. That was a big one. I can't think of others, by heart, and truthfully, I'm not a huge reader. I'm really more of an audiobook guy, and even now, podcast, you listen to those, and, you try to, again, just surround yourself with people that are where you want to be, and just listen, pay attention, and try to take nuggets. I mean, not everybody is the end all say all. Just because somebody that you admire does things exactly this way, you have to do it exactly that way. But you try to pick snippets of the things that people are doing and doing well. And again, a diversification of that. If you've got 8 or 10 people that you admire and respect and are doing well, and they're all doing something pretty consistently similar, well, that might be something you want to embrace and really put into what you're doing. But there may be a one-off thing here or there, and you educate yourself, you get all of that information, and then you have to form, hey, what's your recipe? What are you going to do? What are you going to take out of what you've seen other people do? You might have a few things from several different people's playbooks, but ultimately you have to adapt that to fit you and your personality, your needs, and your goals, and run with it, and put your own spin on it to be able to kind of make it your own and your own brand and make it work, because that's what's going to make it authentically you. And when it's authentically you, man, it's hard to go wrong, especially if you're the guy that's out there, trying to make a dent and do things the right way.
Thank you for sharing all of that wisdom with me and the audience. I think, so I don't have any further questions, but my last question to you would be, Justin, is that you are an investor, and I think that you study the markets as well, and you know the trends, and I think you know the behaviors, how the markets will perform in the coming years and all of that too. So if I'm right, besides real estate, which top 3 markets do you feel can bring the best ROI in next 10 years?
Man, it's kind of cliche, but right now I think we're still in the infancy of the crypto world out there. I still think crypto is still poised to pop off, and AI is not, far, behind that. It's already had a lot of its boom, right? I mean, the last couple of years, from a pure market standpoint, we've seen what AI stocks have done, but I feel like the crypto and AI related things are still kind of early on in what they're going to be and what they're going to do. I think those are going to provide some pretty big returns long term. And other advice that I would say too, don't get too caught up in the market. I think people get caught up in what the market's doing, or whatever political environment's going on. I think you have to be able to look at yourself and look at your business and what you're doing, and just put your head down and go to work every day and put in the effort that you need to do, because again, as somebody that's been doing this for 25 years, I've been through several different presidential administrations, both on both sides of the aisle, and we've had successes no matter what, because of what we're doing and the effort that we're putting in. No doubt some of those policies can make it more or less challenging, but I think if you focus on what you need to do and who you are, you're going to have success no matter what, because you're focused on you and your business and the product that you're providing to your customer. And it's similar to the market, market being up or down, you have to make good decisions and invest into things that you think are going to work out. But, no matter what, those could go either way. But I think it's important to not get too caught up into the markets, because, those can kind of derail you from your main focus, which should be your main business, and making sure that that's functioning and doing well. Because as long as that's going well, whether the markets are doing well or not, you're going to be in good shape.
I think that the core of this conversation should be that the biggest ROI that something can bring to you is your own business. You should invest back into your own business. And
back into yourself, man. That's right. Because it's always going to be your best investment. Not that you can't be diversified doing other things, but those should be secondary. And I guess that's the core of it, is whatever you're investing outside of yourself should be secondary. And if you can only invest in one thing, invest in yourself, because that's always going to pay the biggest dividend, because you know yourself, you know what you're capable of. If you don't believe in yourself, you need to do some self-reflection, because if you're not going to believe in yourself, nobody will. And we're all capable people, man. I think, anybody out there can be successful if they have the right mindset and the right hustle and the right guidance around them. But you're definitely your own biggest asset, and definitely in our industry too. We've got such a great industry, such a good, profitable industry, that you'd be hard to go wrong investing into yourself, into your own company, into helping yourself grow, and whether that's people, equipment, whatever. That's going to definitely get you your best return over most things outside of it. So save that for the surplus profits that you make, and let that be your little side nest egg that you really don't care whether you lose, but your main thing is obviously going to do well as long as you're putting the right time, effort, and energy into it, and that's what's going to keep you comfortable at night. Thank you for your time, man.
Justin. I really loved this conversation, and I really love your energy as well. Any signing off notes or advice you have for the people who are entering into this industry, or anything that you feel we should have touched in this conversation and we didn't?
And nothing too much on things that we didn't touch, but I would just tell guys again that are getting into this industry to find your niche. Relationships are key. work to your strengths, work to your own personal network, but grind, put in the time. Don't be busy, be productive. Look at what's going to be the most productive use of your time, and go out there and put your head down and go to work. There's so much distraction out there. I think that can be some of the biggest failures for guys, is getting distraction and doing busy things, but they're not actually doing the productive things that help you get off the ground. But man, you just got to get out there and grind and go hustle and
Perfect. And I think that
make it
if
happen.
people realize that there is a difference between important things and urgent things, a lot of problems would solve automatically. Thank you so much for your time, Justin. It was a pleasure hosting you, and I really loved the conversation. I really wish you the best for the remaining half of 2025, and I think we should sit down again later this year or next year to talk about some more things as well. Thank you for your time, and have a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You too, man. My pleasure. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.